It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, as we cover the very latest in property news every morning on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and also Amazon. And it's a Tuesday morning today, almost at the end of the month, January the 30th today. I hope you've got a great day lined up. Here's some interesting numbers. Despite rate increases, along with the cost of living and the market uncertainty, 35% of Australia's regional coastal markets have achieved record high housing values in 2023 last year. That is according to CoreLogic. Now, they did a study of nearly 370 coastal markets located at least 50 k's from the nearest capital city CBD. Now, that was undertaken and showing that outer metro Perth's beachside suburbs saw the largest value gains, with Western Australia dominating the list of top coastal suburbs with the highest annual capital growth. Now, the study also reveals and tells us that the top 20 coastal markets, all with median values below $1 million, is highlighting that regional areas are indeed outperforming well-known coastal spots, which will probably continue this year. So some very interesting numbers. Now, coming up this morning, once again, we are back into our beloved time tunnel machine with our summer series of real estate interviews with some of the real estate industry's leading commentators. And coming up, we go back to November of last year. Who is here this morning? Well, Tara Kelly is, to talk about people fainting and also the auction market in Brisbane and how you can save as a younger person. Warren Hogan is back from November of last year when he was talking about the RBA and the more than likely rise of the cash rate for December. And Jeremy Grobben, an auctioneer in Canberra. He loves talking about his beloved Canberra and the auction market, which is all coming up and part of our Real Estate Tuesday.
We dive deep into topics like buying, selling, investing, and maximising your property's value. From mortgage advice to the latest property data and trending numbers, your real estate journey starts here. You're listening to the Summer Series on the Real Estate Podcast.
Absolutely, yes. There's been times where over the last 12 months we've called for an opening bid and there's crickets. However, sort of the last few months there really has been some purpose in people bidding, and that might be also because people are getting more confident in Brisbane with auction, which is great. We're definitely behind Sydney and Melbourne with that. The aggression, the confidence, and the amount of bids per auction certainly has risen quite substantially.
And of course, last weekend it was quite hot there in Brisbane. You had somebody faint.
We did have someone faint. It was 34 degrees. It was a 1 o'clock auction. Unfortunately, the excitement got the better of the lady and she fainted mid-auction, which is never good. I do have my first aid certificate. However, someone else got there before me, luckily. So they were able to help the lady, and we had plenty of water, cold water to give her, luckily. So she was fine, paused the auction and gave her a seat. So she actually did, the family did continue to bid. They weren't successful. However, we had a bit of a laugh about it at the end, which was always good.
And what I wanted to ask you is it takes a fair amount of discipline because, if you're a teenager and you start saving for a property and you bought your first property at 19, there are certain things that you just have to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to spend my money on a massive weekend going nightclubbing because that might cost me $200-300.
Oh, absolutely. And from experience, like you said, I bought my first property at 19 and it takes a huge amount of self-control. It certainly comes from well, for me, it came from my parents, and they also did this at a young age. So I think a lot of coaching from them and a lot of support from them was a good thing. Not in the way of money. I purely saved my own money and paid the deposit myself. So I can certainly relate to Caitlin in that, it takes just such a huge amount of self-control. There's a lot of nights where you're sitting at home and your friends are out and you've just got to bite the bullet and think of the future.
Now, we have teenagers that do listen to the podcast for the amount of information that is being given out. So for that teenager that is saving right now, what do you think is the number one sort of thing to say to yourself along the road of saving? If there's a little bit of a gold nugget, Tara, what would you tell yourself at the age of 16 with what you know now?
You know what? I think looking back, there's more fun to be had when you are financially comfortable and you're a little bit older and able to enjoy the nights out. Looking back, seeing that you've already got a footprint in the property market, you've got no stress, less stress, knowing that you've got your foot in the door already. And I tell you what, those nights are a lot more enjoyable than when you're sort of 18, 19 and you're going out and you're on a little bit of a path to nowhere.
Well, Caitlin McMillan, the 21-year-old we're talking about, hat tipped to you. She says that her strategic approach involved a 6-month search before purchasing, aiming for proximity to the city, ultimately choosing Logan Central due to its booming status and finding a newly renovated property that met her criteria. Well, that's some great information, Tara. How are you winding off for the end of the year? Some people are winding down, but perhaps you're winding up.
Absolutely. We are certainly winding up. It is certainly hot in Brisbane. We've sort of got low stock still. There's not a huge amount of stock, but the buyers are out there and they're absolutely wanting to. And I think this will spill over into the new year for sure.
So in terms of your bookings and how you're looking at the start of 2024, pretty busy?
We are really busy, unusually busy for January. Normally that's our quiet period, but the end of January, we've already got 10 bookings booked in for that 31st. So if people are looking ahead and they're wanting to sell their home in 2024, which is excellent for us.
Gain insights with exclusive conversations from real estate professionals about buying, selling and investing across Australia. You're listening to the Summer Series on the Real Estate Podcast.
And also, you said that if they didn't increase it, you would run down Martin Place where the RBA offices are naked.
Yeah, I was pretty confident we were going to get a rate hike last week, and definitely no one wanted to see me do that. So, maybe it was an idle threat that I was giving the RBA board.
Yeah, also you were saying that over the past 3 years, the RBA's reputation has been somewhat compromised, evident in private sector economists' forecasts, as well as financial market pricing and residential property market behaviour. Failure to raise the rates while core inflation is at 5% would be a significant mistake. Well, they must have been listening to you, Warren, because they did raise it last Tuesday, but you're saying not only on Tuesday did they need to raise it, but they also need to signal a possibility of increasing it again in December for next month.
Yeah. Well, my assessment of the run of data, the inflation result of the last, few months is that it warranted probably about 50 basis points worth of tightening. And this must be sort of seen in light of the fact that Australia's interest rate is a lot lower than other countries. And of course, still below the core inflation rate here. We've still got negative real interest rates. Now, whether the RBA's got that same assessment is another thing altogether. And from reading their statement that the governor put out after making the announcement of a rate hike, it doesn't suggest they're in a hurry to back it up. They were quite sort of soft on the guidance, hence why we've seen things like the Aussie dollar come back and bond yields fall. I think it would be dangerous, as I've been warning sort of for the last 3 months, to think that we're at the end. And that really is what the credibility issue is. Over the last 3 months, the RBA, after every meeting, even if they hadn't hiked, would warn that more rate hikes may be required. But most economists were trying to work out when the cuts would start coming. Financial markets struggled to price, much into the future. And of course, here in Australia, particularly in the big cities, the property markets just kept going up, sort of giving the RBA the middle finger, if you will. So there's a range of dimensions to it, but they really had to act. It's just ridiculous to be running this sort of level of interest rates when we've got so much inflation and a resilient economy.
What's your thoughts and your thinking around this? Because it's affecting businesses, and you're only as good, I said this the other day, you're only as good as your telco supplier.
Yeah. Well, I'm my business runs off Optus, and I thought I hadn't paid the bill because everything was gone. And I had 4 customer engagements, which all could not happen. And more importantly, I couldn't let them know it couldn't happen, but I figured they worked that out. What are the consequences from an economic point of view? It'll be quite minor. I mean, there's a loss of business on the day, but it'll actually be quite minor. It won't really change anything for the overall trajectory of the economy. But we can't have this happen again for any provider in Australia, and certainly not Optus, because this is core infrastructure for a modern economy, and it will only become more and more important. It also, for me, the other thing it highlights is that you can't get rid of cash. You just cannot because of these vulnerabilities. So, look, it's a wake-up call, I think, for everyone around, especially SMEs, where I spend my time, and I'm obviously a small business myself. But I think most importantly, from a regulatory point of view, this is absolutely core infrastructure, up there with electricity and probably even more important in the short term than water. The government's already seemed to be quite on the front foot about sort of getting to the bottom of this. And unfortunately, I think the CEO has got to stand down. This is the second event. She has to show some character. She has to let someone else have a go at trying to sort of take the organisation forward.
Get insider tips from industry professionals and level up your real estate game by unlocking the secrets of successful real estate transactions. You're listening to the Summer Series on the Real Estate Podcast.
One of the great indicators with FOMO is at auction time. So are you seeing any of that in your local market when you're calling these auctions?
Yes, and I've noticed especially the agents who are really speaking with the buyers and helping them with that process, explaining how auctions work, are getting the better results. There's so much involved in the preparation of buyers for those auctions. And you're right, the fear of missing out is certainly a big aspect because there's such a demand for those entry-level properties. So it's really nurturing through that process and making them feel comfortable, especially to make that first bid and also to get to the level where they need to be to buy the property.
You raise a pretty good point because I think it's really important with the preamble of an auctioneer before they get things underway, really just to sort of relax the room, relax outside wherever the auction is taking place, and just to sort of set the rules, which auctioneers tend to do. But the really good auctioneers are the ones that are able to just talk to people that are there and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. These are some of the points about this property, and just kind of set the tone. Is that something that you sort of look to do?
Absolutely. We do it several times a week, remembering that buyers are doing this maybe once every 7 to 10 years. So it's quite a peak moment for them. So to put them at ease, I always like to introduce myself to the bidders to make sure they're a bit comfortable and just make it a bit more conversational. We're in a very strong market. I did notice that some auctioneers could be a little bit more forceful because there was the competition and it was more of a business transaction, whereas now it's that bit more of a nurturing process to get the bidders to feel comfortable and to sort of get them up to the level we need them to be at.
Listen to expert perspectives with exclusive real estate conversations and supercharge your knowledge base with us.
Listings are at the moment where you are on the rise.
Yeah, well and truly. Spring is always obviously a more active time in the market, but particularly in Cootamundra this year, we had a really tight market about 6 months ago, but I think vendors are a bit more comfortable with the state of the market regarding interest rates.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.